Lee Copeland, Director of Special Events and Marketing. Before I introduce our speaker, let me welcome Blanca Torres from Dr. Elba Garcia's office, Commissioner's office. Thank you so much, Blanca, for being here with us. And now let me go ahead and introduce our speaker. Our speaker today, it is AJ Soliz. And AJ is, that's how he likes to be called. AJ is the entertainment director at Traders Village. He has been in the events and entertainment industry for 23 years, started as a radio DJ in El Paso, in Tucson, and Nashville. Has a master's in entertainment business, worked on concert tours for MTV and CMT as a tour manager. He transitioned to agency work and worked on national campaigns specializing in Hispanic experiential marketing. Wow. And most recently worked at Mattel in charge of the Thomas the Train National Tour, and now is the entertainment director for Traders Village. Thank you so much, AJ, for being here with us, and I'm gonna turn it over to you. Welcome.
Thank you, Maria. I felt like I needed like a good hype background music, like good intro. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for attending. I want to thank the Grand Prairie Chamber of Commerce for inviting me and doing this. I apologize to you guys. I am on vacation. I'm here in Orlando, sunny Florida, with doing my brother's wedding. He's getting married. He's, the family's just arriving. So I'm outside in the pool area. So what you see is just the pool area in the back. But, Maria had reached out to me and wanted me to talk about myself. I said, I might know a little bit about that topic. So let's do it. So like Maria said, I'm originally from El Paso, Texas. I was born and raised out there. From humble beginnings, my mom, immigrant from Mexico, the Ciudad Juarez. They came when she was 16 years old, and a few months later, bam, she was pregnant with me. So young teen mom with a young teen dad. My dad was born and raised in Los Angeles. So growing up, I had a little bit of both of the cultures. I had the traditional Mexican culture and then the American culture, even though my dad is Hispanic. He was very Americanized. So grew up with both sides of the family, speaking English and speaking Spanish, and then grew up with my aunts and uncles who were not that much older than I was, and learning English together. And at times life was tough. We lived in a pretty rough area. And like I said, my mom being 16 when she got pregnant with me, 17 when I was born, still going to school, not having money. My grandmother had 10 kids. 5 of them were still living at the house when I was growing up. So we didn't have much growing up, but one of the things that she always told us was that education was key to everything. And the way you presented yourself was always, was a great deal. So she would tell us, it doesn't cost you anything to be clean. It doesn't cost you anything to iron your clothes. It doesn't cost you anything to be presentable. You may be poor, but those are all things, if you could have the worst clothes, but they're going to be the best looking old clothes, the worst clothes that anybody has ever seen. So I grew up with that, knowing that and thinking in that way of thinking. Like I said, even though we didn't have much, anything that we did have, my grandmother would give away to people that were needy. We lived close to the border, and every time that migrant families would come over, they would knock at different doors and ask for, food, clothing, toys for their kids. And guess what? My grandmother gave them all. So, I never had any toys. My grandmother cleaned hotels, and she was also a maid for different people, and they would give her the toys, and those were the toys that I had. So it would be years later before I had a He-Man, and when I had it, I'm like, this is my treasure. He might have only had one arm, but gosh darn it, that was the He-Man I wanted for years. And then later on, my grandma's like, yeah, some other kid wants He-Man too. And I'm like, wait, what? I had to wait for years, and I had like, a month to play with it. But that was the upbringing I had. It was rough, it was tough, but it was also very, very beautiful. I loved it. Never knew I was growing up poor, because it seemed like we were the richest one in the poor area. And it wasn't until I went to college that I saw that, wow, my upbringing was pretty rough. I had we were poor. That's when I got exposed to other cultures, and I have friends that like, oh yeah, we would vacation in Barbados. I'm like, where in the world is Barbados, and why are you vacationing? And so it was like, your mom doesn't work 3-4 jobs. What are you talking about? This is crazy. So, it was, growing up was tough. At 5 years old, my parents divorced, so I was solely in the custody of my mom, and they only spoke Spanish. So it wasn't until I got to school and started taking English as a second language, working on my English skills, and that marked me throughout my entire school. Even though I was already in high school, spoke not perfect but pretty good English. They still had me in ESL. When I went to college, I was still marked as an ESL kid, so I had to take remedial English courses, even though by the end of high school, I was taking honors English and college level English classes. I once I got into, well, let me back up. Around in the mid 90s, I got a little bit rebellious as a teen and started clubbing, going out to clubs in Ciudad Juarez. They don't card you. There's no age restrictions. So I was in high school going to full adult nightclubs. It was then that I fell in love with music, entertainment. I started hanging out with DJs that were there. This was a dangerous time in Mexico. The cartels were battling out, but there was a lot of money being thrown in Juarez. So there was these big, big, lavish parties, and they needed more DJs. So these guys were training me to just go out to these cartel parties and just DJ. Didn't seem dangerous at the time. It seemed like fun, but now that I think about it, it was really dangerous. So grew up doing that, and as a favor, I got connected with different DJs and started going on. Well, that led me to going into radio. I decided, well, you know what, I want to try radio and TV. When I went to University of Arizona, I took an internship that first summer when I got back home to El Paso with Univision. Started off as a camera guy. So I was going on location and interviewing people, the accidents, whatever was happening. And one day, the TV station and the radio station were really close together. They were the same building. This radio DJ comes up to me and says, "Do you speak Spanish?" I said, I sure do. He's like, "I like your voice. I don't speak Spanish, but I'm a DJ of this show, and people are calling me and asking me for something, and I don't understand. Can you translate for me?" So I run over to the radio side. I take the call. I translate, and he says, "Okay, great. I like your voice. Can you read this commercial for me on the air?" I said, "Sure." I don't know what I'm doing, but he pressed the button and I spoke. He said, I like that. Come back in 15 minutes and do it again. I said, okay, I don't know what I just did, but that's fine. So I went back, I was video editing. This was, like I said, this is the mid 90s. So we were still doing the reel to reel and cutting and splicing. And then calls back, he's like, hurry up. And so I run back and then I read another commercial and he says, read this one too. So I read that one too. I'm like, wait a minute, am I doing your job? Because he's like, don't worry about it. I'll give you $20. I said, great. I was getting paid $4.25 an hour and I just made $20, in seconds. So I said, yes, let's do this. And we just became buddies. He was much older than I was, but I was like, hey, I can read and talk as much as you want, man. And so, he started teaching me about radio and doing it. And it got to a point where one day he was out sick and he called me and said, hey, can you do the show? You know the buttons to push. Just do the show. Then, there's a log. It tells you the music. Just do it. A friend of mine is going to go and help you. And you just talk. I said, okay, I can do that. So I did that, and he had a friend in Tucson back in when I went back to school in Arizona, I had a job. I started working overnights at a radio station. I went from regional Mexican at Univision to top 40 in Tucson. Went there, and my shift was the dreaded midnight. So I was from midnight to 5 a.m. So I was a full-time student going to University of Arizona. I also boxed for the university, and I played rugby for the university, and I was a DJ from 12 to 5. So I never slept, but I loved it. I loved every minute of it. And then I was working probably about 3 months. And one day I came into my shift, and the doors were locked. And I was like, what's going on? Did I just get fired? I couldn't get in. My code wasn't working. I called the main guy, who was the morning show host, and I said, hey man, I can't open the door. He says, try this code, try that code. No, nothing. He finally drives down to the station. He can't. He calls, finds out the station's been sold. Clear Channel had bought it. This was so there was a Telecommunications Act in '96 that was signed, and it actually allowed, the monopolization of TV and radio. So these before, you can only have a certain owner could only have so many big radio stations in one market. That opened up the flood doors, and Clear Channel was the big guy. So they came in and just started buying out everything and firing everybody, and then starting doing syndication. So we came in and no job. So 3 months into my famous radio career, didn't have a job. Half of the team went to a Tejano radio station called La Caliente in Tucson, and they brought me along. They said, well, we need an overnight guy. You're going to do overnight. So I started doing overnight Tejano. And
Okay, it's frozen, right?
oh, I'm sorry, guys. Okay, so technical difficulty. So we're back. So what was I saying? So yeah, the radio station La Caliente that got raided by the feds. Apparently, the owners were doing some money laundering, and yeah, it wasn't good. So we were all out of jobs again, and we decided to all do retail stuff. And so I had a brief work briefly as a cashier at Best Buy. That was my whole big retail experience. And then I realized I really didn't like retail. Luckily for us, a guy out of California who used to be a 60s radio DJ named Art LeBeau, bought out the station and turned it into Arizona's first hip hop station. So La Caliente became hot. He hired everybody back, and started as a DJ at Hot 98 in Tucson. So I went from regional Mexican to top 40 to Tejano, and now I'm doing hip hop and rap. Quite a transition, but loved every minute of it. Was working overnights again, then later got hired on to do the overnights and the morning show. And then at the end, it was just the morning show. By the time I graduated, I was doing morning show. And at that point, I graduated from the University of Arizona with a marketing degree, but decided I wanted to do more in music. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was the first one in my family to graduate from college. So, we didn't, I didn't have any guidance into what I should do. I just knew I got this degree. I had nothing, I didn't know what I was going to do with it. So after talking with some people in the industry, they said, well, you know what, there's a school in Phoenix called the Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences. And they have a pretty good audio program, and you can do audio engineering or tour with bands and live the rock and roll lifestyle. I'm like, I'm all about that. AJ rock and roll lifestyle, it goes hand in hand. So let's do that. I went, applied, I got in, started doing it. And then I started falling in love more with the business side. So I got my certification as a front of house audio engineer. So there's the guys that sit in front of the stage and do the the audio work, which is all fun, but I like more the business side. So I kept on asking and more questions with the business instructors. And one of the instructors said, hey, you know what? I went to this school in Tennessee called Middle Tennessee State. They have an actual degree for music business. You should go. And I said, I would love to, but I don't have the money to apply. Be out of state tuition. I was coming up with so many excuses. Well, he surprised me. He actually put in my application. He paid for the entrance, for the admission fee and all of that. And he said, it's my gift to you. Just, do something of yourself. I said, wow, okay. Nobody's ever done that for me. So I took it to heart. I told the radio station, I said, hey guys, I'm leaving. I'm going to Tennessee to go to college. And they're like, wait a minute, you just graduated college, and what in the world are you going to be doing in Tennessee? Why Tennessee? I said, I've never been there. I don't know anything about Tennessee, but I'm going. I had a little Honda CRX. For those that you don't know, it's like a Honda Civic chopped in half. So it's a 2-door Honda Civic with literally the back half missing. And I packed everything I could in there and drove straight from Tucson to Nashville. I didn't even know how far that was. So I just kept on driving, hopes that it was close. And then day turned into night, and then the sun was coming up again, and I was still driving. I had no idea. This was before GPSs, so I was with I had stopped at AAA and gotten some maps along the way, and so I put my map skills to test. Once I got to Tennessee, I was poor. I didn't have anything. Everything I had gone to go and get in my apartment, and I had stopped in El Paso. My dad had given me a sack of beans and a sack of rice and a pot, and it's like, hey, you could at least survive off of this. I said, okay, great, thank you, and moseyed on over to Tennessee. So for the first week, I had rice and beans every day, and that was my meal, and I was just happy to be there. I had gotten there a few weeks prior to school starting, and so I didn't know anything, and it was so cold because I went into wintertime. So that was my first time experiencing cold like that, and snow and black ice, and I was like, what is happening? So I started applying at radio stations, and nobody would give me a job. Nobody would give me a job. There wasn't a Hispanic radio out there. I didn't fit the demographic. I didn't fit the demographic of a hip hop station. I didn't fit the demographic of a country station. Or a top 40 or whatnot. So everybody was like, well, you got a great voice, you got great experience, but you don't fit the profile. And I actually had a guy say, well, you sound kind of black, but you look kind of white, but you're Mexican. So, we can't market that. I said, well, I don't know what that means, sir, but I guess I don't have the job. So I got a little bit discouraged. Where the school was, Middle Tennessee, is in a small town called Murfreesboro, Tennessee. So they have a small downtown, similar to like a Grapevine downtown, and just walked up and down. I saw a help wanted sign at a scuba shop. And I said, hey, I need a job. I don't have any money. And kind of told him my quick story. He said, you speak Spanish? I said, yes. He said, well, you know what? I'll hire you with a condition that you teach my kids how to speak Spanish. I said, okay, great. How old are your kids? He said, 8 and 5. I said, well, okay, I've never been a teacher, but I know the language, so I guess I can. And so we did. And he saw, he had heard my story. He saw I was struggling. He said, hey, look, here's $500. He just gave me $500 cash that very same day. And he said, hey, just think of it as an advance. And, just show up here at 8 o'clock in the morning tomorrow and we'll get started. I said, yes, sir. And I was very thankful. I went to Walmart and bought all sorts of things. And I was super excited. Went there, started working at this scuba shop. And the first thing that he did is get me scuba certified and started learning. I didn't know. I mean, I'm a kid from the Southwest. What am I going to know about swimming in the ocean? But got scuba certified. Then he started teaching me about it because he also did rappelling and going into caves, which I didn't know the term at the time, but it's called spelunking. So he was vice president of the National Speleological Society, and I was learning all these terminologies, and everything was just so new to me. And I said, great, but my passion is music. So didn't give up. I kept on applying. I finally landed a job with a Christian radio station called Way FM in Nashville. So started working with Way FM. It wasn't a genre that I knew at the time. And I was working with artists that I had never heard of and didn't know how big they were until later on. And that's at that time I started going to church as well. So then I was like, okay, people were like, oh, well, you know who, Rebecca St. James is? Like, oh yeah, I just had her in the studio the other day. Oh my gosh, you had Rebecca St. Yeah, Michael W. Smith. I'm like, yeah, he's a good guy. Yeah, I don't. Like, oh my gosh, he did my. And so I didn't know. But then I realized radio wasn't it for me. It wasn't enough. It wasn't enough of a thrill for me to just be a radio DJ. I wanted to do more. So with Way FM, I started doing concert promotions. I said, I think this is it. I think this is where I want to be. So I started working more and more of the concerts. And at Tennessee, I was working on my degree for music business, so bachelor's in music business. And I started becoming friends with the counselors and talking and, always like, hey, you guys got any cool positions, any cool jobs, whatever. And one day, one of them came across a job opening for MTV, looking for tour managers. And she had briefly told me about it. I said, yeah, you got my resume. Send them in. I don't care. Send it in everywhere. So one day I'm at Buffalo Wild Wings with my friends. I get a call and it says, hey, is this Arturo Soliz? I said, yes. It's like, this is Lucia Folk from MTV. Want to fly you in for an interview. I said, oh, come on, get out of here. It's like, who put you up to this? And it's like, no, I'm serious. I'm calling from MTV. And I hung up. I hung up the phone. And my friends were like, who is that? I'm like, somebody's playing a joke. I'm trying to see who went to the restroom. I'm like, okay. Because I'd always tell my friends, I said, I'm going to make it. I'm going to get out of these small towns and I'm going to work with big artists. And so they would always, they were like, yeah, AJ, whatever. So I calls back again. Is like, look, you applied for this position. We're offering it to you. We want to fly you in. But if you hang up on me, I'm not going to call again. And then said, okay. She's like, look at your caller ID. So I see that area code. That's a Manhattan area code. I'm calling you from MTV office right now. We want to fly you in. Can you be on the plane tomorrow? And then that's when I said, oh, this is for real. And so, yeah, I said, yes, ma'am. What time? The flight, I think it left at midday. So it didn't give me any time. I said, to prepare it. I said, okay, fine. I'll be there midday. In the morning, I called the council. I'm like, I got an interview with MTV. I don't even own a suit. What do I do? What's happening? I had a friend who had a suit. I borrowed one of his suits. It was like, I think a size and a half too big for me. But I went out there and I guess I crushed the interview because they hired me on the spot. They hired me on the spot and they said, okay, in 2 weeks, you start traveling nationwide. I said, well, wait, what? What do you mean I'd start traveling? So what are my days off? It's like, never. Well, what do you mean never? Like, oh no, you work year round. You go from one concert to another, and that's going to be your life. Like, wait, I don't know. What about vacation days? And it's like, you don't get any vacation day. That's it. That's your life. If there's no concerts going on, you take a break here and there. Sometimes the concert tours break in the city, from a couple of days to a week, and that's your time off. I said, wow, that's pretty intense. Said, do you still want it? I said, sure, why not? Let's do this. And I did. I went in there blindly, not knowing what was going on, what was happening. And they put me with this video DJ, a VJ called Carson Daly. And I was doing Total Request Live. So it was the top 10 countdown show, and it was live from Houston, live from Dallas, from, you know, Myrtle Beach, Panama City, all over. So I started touring with that. And then CMT has a similar show called the Most Wanted Countdown. And so I started doing the Most Wanted live tour with CMT. Now, even though I lived in Nashville, I didn't know anything about country at all. I knew Garth Brooks, and that was pretty much all I knew about country music at that point. You know, I grew up DJing parties since I was 14, 15 years old, and it was always club music. And then all of a sudden now country. So my very first gig was to do fanfare in Nashville. And they were going to teach me the ropes of country music. And it was different from doing Top 40 MTV. And I'm meeting with the people from CMT. And we're in a tent, and it's catered. So I go get a plate to eat, and everything is busy. All the tables are busy except for this table with these girls. I asked them if I can sit down. They said yes. So I just started chit-chatting with them, like, oh, so what do y'all do? They said, oh, we sing. I'm like, oh, great. You know, what do you sing? This country? I'm like, awesome. Are you guys, have any hits? And they're like, no, we have some. I said, oh, great. I'm like, you girls look good. You sound good. I mean, best of luck to you. And they're like, oh, thank you. And then my new boss comes up, and she's like, hey, so I see you met the Dixie Chicks. I'm like, nope. And they're like, well, they're sitting right next to you. I said, oh, okay. Oh, you guys are Dixie. That's a good. I was like, yeah, they look like they're gonna make it. And they're like, no, they've made it, and they're pretty big, and you're gonna be on their tour. I said, oh, okay. Well, thank you. And that was my introduction to country music. Started off with the Dixie Chicks, then went off and did Brooks and Dunn and the Neon Circus tour, and then did Toby Keith and Shania Twain and a bunch of country. And then I decided, you know what? I've had enough country. We were going into some really, down south backwoods areas, and a lot of, like the Cotton Festival, the Peanut Festival, the Peach Festival here, this and that. And some of the places were pretty scary. Because I was always on the tour. I was always the only non-white person there, and people would have some choice words for me at times. And I said, I've had enough of this. Sometimes it was a bit scary, and I said, let me get back on MTV, and called my old supervisor and said, hey, you know what? Can I get back on with you guys? It was fun being in CMT, but I like MTV better. They said, well, we don't have any touring positions here for you right now. So you can either stay or come work in the office. I said, well, I don't know. Touring office. I said, well, if an opportunity opens up, whatever it is, I'll take it. Okay. So she calls me up a few weeks later and says, hey, you speak Spanish, right? I said, yes. I said, how fluent? I said, pretty fluent. She says, okay, great. I'm glad to hear, because I just booked you to a tour in Italy. I said, okay, but they speak Italian. They're like, oh, Spanish, Italian, it's the same thing. I said, well, I hope so. I've never met an Italian person in my life, but I hope it is. It wasn't, not anywhere close. So within a week, I had to fly to Italy, and I had to start touring in Italy. So I fly into Italy. I don't know anybody over there. There's these two guys with the signs. As soon as I get off of the airport, I fly into Milan, and they have these, little signs, and it says AJ Soliz. And I'm like, okay, great. And they start talking to me. I'm like, habla español, English, I don't, and they're like, they just shaking their heads, and they just walk away. I'm like, did I say something? So then I'm following them with my suitcases, and they're talking amongst each other. I could tell they weren't very happy. And we end up we get in the car, and then they start talking amongst each other, and they kept on saying something about Madonna, like they're Madonna, Madonna, Madonna this, Madonna that. And I'm like, something happened to Madonna? Did she pass away? Did something happen? And so they just dropped me off at the hotel, and they just literally just dropped me off. They were just, I guess, disgusted that I didn't speak Italian, and they dropped me off. And I'm like, okay, so how do I check in? What's going on here? And I get to the hotel and finally get settled down. I call my mom and I said, Mom, I'm in Italy. I'm all right. Everything is good. But can you tell me what happened to Madonna? She's like, I don't know. I don't know. She's like, you haven't heard anything? Nothing? She's like, no. Well, come to find out, Madonna, when they say Madonna, it's like saying like, oh my gosh, like they were talking about me. I'm like, oh my, can you believe it? Oh my gosh, can you believe it? And so I'm like, okay, well, that was my first taste of Italian sarcasm. And I learned all the cuss words before I learned any of the good stuff. But out there in Italy, I had the privilege of traveling, touring with the Black Eyed Peas, Dido, Outkast, and so I had a good tour out there. But my work visa ran out, and I had to come back to the States. And when I came back, MTV wasn't doing concerts anymore. So I said, okay, I'm ready to tour over here. And they're like, yeah, we're not doing concerts anymore. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, yeah, we've kind of changed the format. We're doing reality TV. I said, but the first word in the title is music television. Why? What do you mean you don't do music anymore? So I was very confused. So, well, you got a marketing degree. We'll send you over. We acquired a new station called Spike, and we'll put you out there, and you can be in the marketing department. So I went from traveling with, Outkast and the Black Eyed Peas to working in a cubicle in Santa Monica, California. And I said, well, what in the world is happening? I don't like this. I had to buy new clothes. I had to dress, with a suit and tie. And like I said, I've never even known that. Not even for my interview that I own one. So I said, what is happening here? And I just didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. Started venturing and doing some freelance concerts. So I was able to connect with the cousin of a very famous rock artist, Bon Jovi. His cousin Charles was in the scene and was booking a lot of concerts. So he got me to tour with Bon Jovi and with Aerosmith, and got to tour with Sheryl Crow. And I was, getting back into the music scene throughout this entire time. And, I was getting burned out. By that time, I was almost at, 6 years straight of just pure music and not seeing my family, not seeing anything. And then the money wasn't all that great either. I ran into these guys that were doing a concert, and it was experiential marketing. Didn't know what it was, but they said, hey, man, they pay you double what you're earning right now when you do like a fourth of the work. So I decided to try it out, where I started working in national campaigns for Coca-Cola, AT&T, and a number of other different brands. So I left music completely and I started doing this experiential. And then I was able to tie both worlds together. So I was touring with like Enrique Iglesias and on behalf of AT&T and doing all the marketing and doing all the concerts. So it was really cool. It was a really cool transition to go from, from the music to the marketing side, and then being able to combine those two. Fast forward, I did experiential marketing, for almost 10 years. From that, then I got married and decided, you know what, I need to settle down, get more of a corporate job. And I started working for Mattel, out of New York. And I was in charge of Thomas the Train. So Thomas the Train has tours throughout the entire US, Canada, not Mexico, but and then actually throughout the world. I was just in charge of US and Canada. And we had 47 shows, 47 different cities. throughout the entire United States, even in Alaska and in Vancouver, all those areas. So it was really nice. Problem with that is that throughout the time that I was with Mattel, it started off with a company called Hit Entertainment. Hit Entertainment was bought out by Fisher Price, and then Fisher Price was bought out by Mattel. And I was with them throughout the entire transition. And yeah, it was interesting and how things changed and how corporate changed and their values and their targeting and their ways of doing stuff. So all of that changed. And at the end, I said, you know what, I'm done with entertainment. I'm done with all of this. I've devoted my entire life. I've missed weddings. I've missed funerals. I've missed, kids being born, families made. I would call friends from time to time, like, hey man, I'm in town, let's go party. And they're like, oh, the baby's sick. I'm like, what baby? Well, my youngest one, the youngest one. Yeah. I was like, how many kids you have? 3. What is going on? What do you mean? I was like, last time I saw you, you were single. I was like, well, yeah, that was 10 years ago. I'm like, wow, okay. So time flew. I was in a bubble. So everybody else, the world around me grew up, everything around me grew up, and except for me. So I decided I was going to leave entertainment and venture off and do something. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just know that I wanted some more time for myself and devote to my family and things that really matter. And, I went on that venture, and lo and behold, I get a call from Traders Village and said, hey, I saw your resume and want you to come in. I said, yeah, I don't know. Seems like a cool thing. I don't know. Met with them. It was a great match. I love what they had to offer and the opportunities. It still allowed me to do what I wanted to do, but the convenience of being at home every night. And work through that. And it's been a great match. It is a great company. The funny thing is that once I put in my LinkedIn that I was working at Traders Village, my old boss from MTV called, and it's like, hey Jay, a flea market? Are you serious? What happened? What was it? Drugs, alcohol? What is it? You left us, we didn't leave you. You got a job back. We'll put you in the office. We'll get you the help that you need, man. And we'll get you back on your feet. We love you, and you're like a little brother to us. I was like, no. I said, I'm perfectly fine. No drugs, no alcohol. It's just the way it is, and I love it here. And I was explaining to her, it is a flea market, but it's the largest in America. And some of these events that I get, concerts that I put on, I get 4,000 to 5,000 people. And she was like, what, really? And say, who helps you with all that? I said, just me. I said, I get to choose the concerts, I get to choose the dates, I get to choose the talent. It's all me. And so, she was like, well, that's pretty awesome. So, and, so here I am right now. Some of the difficulties along the way, I told you guys, the progress, but what I didn't mention is that every time that I went, I was always segmented as the Hispanic kid, the Mexican kid. And I said, well, I speak English. Well, yeah, but Mexican market. So when I went into experiential marketing, I never got the big gigs. I never got the big, general market gigs like the NFL, the NCAA, because they always wanted me in the Mexican market. So I was always going to the hoods of every different cities while everybody, my friends are going to the Super Bowl. They have less experience, but I was stuck doing the Hispanic marketing. And at the time I was like, wow, that, I was pretty upset. Like, well, I want general market. I have, at that time I had 2 bachelor's degrees. And I said, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of always getting put, in the back burner just because I speak Spanish. And like, oh, we need a Spanish guy. We need a Spanish guy. Go to Hispanic marketing. I didn't like, and the same thing with concerts. Oh, you're the Hispanic guy. Go to Spanish. I'm like, well, I like rock. I like hip hop. Then I soon to like, I learned to like country. But I was always getting put in the more Hispanic areas, the Hispanic artists, the Hispanic accounts. and I struggled throughout my entire career with that. So in order to get back at everybody, I went to college again and decided to get a master's degree. And I didn't stop at one, I got two. So I got dual masters, and I said, well, yeah, try to tell me I'm Hispanic only now. So that's when I landed a job with Mattel and was working. But throughout the time, I was young, I had a chip on my shoulder, but I worked hard and to prove everybody wrong, while I was I would complain to my mom and my grandma and say, it's not fair. It's not fair that I worked so hard. I can do the job better. I got a better education. And, I'm seeing my counterparts are getting promoted and given these big accounts when I know I could do a better job. And, my grandma would always tell me, it's like, well, then prove them wrong. Prove them wrong. You do your job right. Do it better. Don't complain. What do you, so, it taught me a lot, having that strong foundation that I had was key to me just continuing on, because I had, coworkers that were in similar situations, and they just gave up. They quit their careers. They went to do something else, and they never got past that stage. So I'm very fortunate of having that foundation, that support that I had.
Hey, AJ, I have a quick question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
This is Michelle. So,
yes.
So we're getting close to the end, and I was just curious because I wonder too if, I see, and I think probably everybody on the call also thinks of having the two, being bilingual is a fantastic benefit, shouldn't be a penalty by any means, like you've talked about how they kind of held it against you. Do you think that, had you been a little older when you were put in those situations, that you might have been able to kind of say that to them? You know what I mean? Kind of, or, it sounds like you continued on anyway. You persevered and did the things that you wanted to do, and that furthered yourself and your career. But at the time when they were sending you to those, not great neighborhoods and those lesser events, what do you think would have made a difference for you? Oh, I can't hear you now. You're muted. Sorry. You're muted.
All right. There we go. Yeah. There we go. Yeah, most certainly. It was experience. It was being able to speak up for myself, and just being able to stand up. And, in the beginning, I was just kind of get angry and just walk away. I'm like, great, fine. And it was just being young. I started off very young. I graduated high school at 17. So at 17 is when I started my first job at Univision, and going throughout. So I was in my early 20s when I was 21 when I started with MTV. So I started my career very young. I was very ambitious, very young. I just wasn't mature. Didn't know how to speak up, stand up for myself, and really, and really say that. I would get mad. I would complain to my coworkers. I would complain to my family, but never really spoke up, with supervisors. And when if I did, it was coming across, now that I see, it was coming across as more of a whining. It's like, oh, of course you want the big one, the big accounts, it's more money.
Well, when I listen to your whole story, like I hear you coming from, like you said, I think humble beginnings, and then talk about sort of being like thrust into like corporate America with Univision. And then I think it's so cool and exciting that you kind of based on your ability, so it definitely was earned, but like kind of rode the wave of, and you had that free spirit about you, that you were open to opportunities, and you took advantage of all the opportunities. And then along the way, you ran into some really great people, like the guy that sent you off to your other degree, and then the guy who hired you, and you didn't even tell us, how did it work out with the Spanish lessons for the kids?
It worked out great. Those kids are now, I think one is getting married already. They got college degrees. I still keep in touch with them. It worked out great. The guy became like a second father to me. And, I didn't have money to go back home for the holidays or during the summer. So I would stay with him and his family. It was a good adventure.
Oh, that's awesome. I don't know if anybody else has questions. I always do, so I thought I'd get them out of the way. Anybody else?
Well, great story, AJ. I just enjoyed hearing it, and particularly, there's so many. I can relate to being part of a large family, and being the first off to college. My question is, how did you get on the path to college, and what was instrumental to that? And then being in that club environment, how did you survive the pitfalls that so many other people fall into?
So college was never an option not to attend. My grandmother said, you go to college, and after that, if you want to be in drugs, be a gang member, do whatever you want, you can do it, but you go to college first. I grew up in a rough neighborhood. It was, with gangs all over the place, and my friends were doing drugs and being in gangs. And she's like, "Yeah, you can do it. I'm not saying you can't. Just go to college first. Get to college, do what you can. You can do whatever you want afterwards." I was like, "Okay, well, that seems reasonable." But yeah, that was never an option. So went through that, and that it goes to the same thing with the with the partying and the clubs and and the DJing and the nightlife. It's always okay. You do what you got to do, and then you have your responsibilities. It's okay to party. It's okay to do whatever you got, but you have to be responsible. If you can't handle both of them, then you're doing something wrong, and maybe it's not the right thing for you. I was like, okay, the whole ultimate goal was always college.
And I think that was stress. I don't know if it's stress as much as it used to be, but it was similar to us. We basically were taught, if you don't go to school, you're gonna die in these streets. So,
yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. I don't know if we don't communicate that message enough now, but yes, I definitely heard that. Great story.
Well, back then we didn't have internet. We didn't have all, the knowledge that we had, that we have now. So, when I tell my nephews, I'm like, you got to go to school, learn, get you a trade, get like, oh, I want to I can learn everything from YouTube. Yeah, I can do this. I'm like, oh, great. I was like,
YouTube,
I just tell them, I'm sorry.
No, I was saying YouTube is turning into what used to be the NBA back in the day. Everybody was going to the NBA back in the day.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. I was probably about a foot and a half too short to be in the NBA, but I had goals too. I was going to be the Mexican Michael Jordan. But any other questions, guys?
You are already a Mexican Michael Jordan.
No questions. I'm reading the comments, guys. Thank you all. It's been an interesting roller coaster in life, and I'm just excited to see what else God has for me. That's I like Michelle says, I kind of ride with the wave. Whatever life throws at me, I just enjoy it. So we'll see what life has.
Let me ask this, if no one has any other questions. What are, you had a lot of mentors in your life that poured into you. What are some of the challenges you find now trying to do the same thing with this generation? Or how do you relate to them to give them those same lessons?
I think it's some of the same frustrations that some of my mentors have with me, thinking that when I was young, I thought I knew it all. I thought I had all the answers to everything, that their ways of thinking were old. And, it's like, okay, well, you don't know what I've been through. And so I find the same thing when, with a younger generation, they're like, well, you don't understand this, you don't understand that, it's different now. Yeah, it's cool, you have a cool background, but this is what's cool now. So it's I have a nephew, he's like, well, yeah, uncle, you did all this, but did you tour with Justin Bieber? I'm like, he wasn't even born. I'm like, well, yeah, well, you're not that cool. Like, oh, we're okay, well, sorry. So it's just a struggle of the communication, the age gap, the generation gaps, and and also I feel that, you know, because I hear with my nephews and their friends that they feel like what they're going through is unique, that nobody else has gone through, and it's hard to break through that and say, oh no, you know, it's been happening from generation to generation.
Yes.
You know, whatever you feel, I mean, the times have changed, but the struggles still remain the same.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Anyone else?
Well, if there is no other questions, let me see. No, I don't see any more questions. So thank you so much, AJ, Soliz. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you for sharing your story, very inspirational. I think that you are one of those Hispanic persons that I know, well, with background Hispanic, that you really live the culture. Your Spanish is perfect. I really enjoy to talk and mingle with you. You also, you are such a great person in Traders Village. You have brought so many new ideas and new resources. I mean, I do see Traders Village keeping you for many more years over there. You have done a fantastic job. Thank you so much, AJ.
Oh, thank you.
If there is no more questions or comments, we are adjourned.
Thank you, guys. I'm about to jump into this pool right here, so this is what has been on my background. All right, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.